Okay, can we start the meeting in open session? Can I begin by welcoming members to today's committee meeting at the Tullyglass Hotel, Ballymena. It's certainly, from a committee's chair's perspective, it is good to be out again. This committee is designed in such to be public facing, and I think it's a good news story that we are down here today and out and about to be able to see what's going on, and I look forward to the visits later on and the exciting developments in relation to Wrightbus and the decarbonisation programme. So members, without further ado, I'll provide a brief overview of the day's business. The committee today will consider subordinate legislation and have a departmental briefing on the review of taxi fares. We will also have a briefing by Wrightbus, Driving a Greener Future. I'll go to agenda item number 1, which is apologies. I have three. I have Patrick Delargy, Cara Hunter and David Hilditch. George Robinson has indicated that he will be along to the meeting later on. Does anybody else have any other apologies they wish to notify me of? No. Okay. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is chairperson's business. Could I also put just firstly in record my thanks to Sustran for their e-bike trial at Parliament Buildings. Anybody that did get a go on it, I think most of us did, were very impressed. It was certainly a sight to see the committee members going around the front of the hill and with a wee bit of help to get back up the hill too. So thank them for that, and it's certainly something that maybe in future we could look towards getting a briefing from Sustran in relation to both the e-bike trial and indeed the wider sort of sustainable travel. Could I also say to members that in most circumstances the committee requests that Hansard record the committee's briefings. However, given the large quantity of legislation going through committees and plenary, Hansard must prioritise this and are less likely in the coming weeks to be in a position to carry out this function for committee briefings. So it's just to make members aware of that. Could I also advise members that the committee staff are organising an informal engagement event with organisations and individuals who have requested briefings from the committee? You'll remember we talked about this at our strategic planning day. Initial plans are to hold the event on the afternoon of the 15th of December. The event will be for 1 hour, and I would encourage members, because there's quite a number of those that wish to come before the committee, but unfortunately we didn't have the time, and we came to a collective agreement that it would be best for us to give some form of fair hearing to those that have wanted over the period of COVID to address the committee and have been unable. So the proposed outline of the event would be, and it's depending on whether we have numbers, is for a member will have an outline discussion with one group with the brief of listening to their concerns and establishing how the committee can assist. After 40 minutes, there will be a plenary session where the member summarises the issue and makes a proposal to the committee. So it would be like an MLA surgery, and it would be, I sense it's an online discussion facilitated by the Assembly Engagement Team. I know they have done this type of forum for the Economy Committee and others. So I just wanted to get members' thoughts on that being as a proposed way forward to have those conversations. Cathal, you have
yeah, Chair, it was a different matter, but I would support.
You would support that forum?
Yes. And just on you were saying there, Chair, about the Hansard not being able to record for us. Is there an opportunity for the relevant researcher to be there to take notes for us if we needed for certain things? I mean, could we request that?
We can.
I mean, it's just in case we miss some vital points. Yeah,
we can ask the researcher to see if, I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just to cover that gap, and you know what I mean? I'm sure I do agree it's good to be back out in the constituencies again as part of the committee's work. Thank you.
Okay, so members, in relation to that online discussion forum for those groups, members broadly content with that type of forum, that it's literally like a round robin to ensure that we hear all views. I will circulate a list of those stakeholder groups that are to be included. I think there's about 6 of it.
There's 6.
6, yes. I think it might be in the pack, is it?
No,
it's not, but we'll circulate to the members the 6 groups. But it's important that we have as many members there, because we won't be able to host the event if we don't, in order to give them a fair hearing. So the proposal I've discussed with you today, I proposed a proposed date and time, which would be the afternoon of the 15th of December. If the committee is in touch with members regarding that, I would ask you please to come back to confirm your attendance if possible. Members agreed on that point?
Agreed.
Okay. We move now to agenda item number 3, which is draft minutes. So I turn members' attention to page 6, which is draft minutes of the meeting on the 10th of November 2021. Are members content that the minutes are true and accurate reflection? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, members. Okay. Agenda item number 4, which is matters arising. If we turn members' attention to page 17 of your pack, which is matters arising from the meeting on the 10th of November 2021, can I ask members if they have any issues arising from the meeting? No issues? Okay. Turn members' attention to page 22, which is outstanding committee requests for information. Just for noting, members are content to note.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, members. I'll now move to agenda item number 5, which is correspondence. And can I draw members' attention to page 38 of your meeting pack? So members will see 3 pieces of correspondence. Members content to note, or is there anything? Are you content with the actions as suggested in the correspondence? Note that we have a note. And we have members to agree a schedule for a briefing from Northern Ireland Water in the Forward Work Programme, and the other one is members to note. Members content?
Great, Chair.
Great, thank you. We move now to agenda item number 6, which is subordinate legislation. SL1's not subject to Assembly procedure. Can I advise members that there is only one proposal for a statutory rule not subject to Assembly proceedings at page 44 of your pack? SL1, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions, Lisburn Order, Northern Ireland 2021. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule?
Content.
Content. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 7, which is subordinate legislation, SRs not subject to Assembly proceedings. Can I advise members again that there are 3 statutory rules not subject to Assembly proceedings? There have been no changes to policy content since the SL1s were considered by the committee. So I'll turn members' attention to page 49. SR 2021-294, the Parking Places, Loading Bay and Waiting Restrictions, Randallstown Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2021. At page 51, SR 2021-296, the Traffic Weight Restrictions Clarity Order, Northern Ireland 2021. And at page 56, SR 2021-290, the Road Races Ulster Rally Order, Northern Ireland 2021. Can I advise members to note the statutory rule unless they have any issues to raise with the proposals? Are members content with the statutory rules?
Content.
Content. Thank you, members. Okay, we will now move to agenda item number 8, which is our first briefing of this morning, which is a departmental briefing on the review of taxi fares. I advise members that Hansard will record the meeting. And I'll turn members' attention to page 65, Departmental Briefing Paper, Update on the Taxi Action Plan and Outcome of Taxi Fare Targeted Consultation. At page 69, SL1, the Taxi Meter Devices and Maximum Fares Amendment Regulation, Northern Ireland 2021. And at page 72, Proposals for a Financial Support Package for New Taxi Drivers. The proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure, and the Assembly will consider the proposal of the statutory rule following the departmental briefing. So at this stage, can I welcome to our committee this morning Dr Chris Hughes, Director, Safe and Accessible Travel Division, and Mr Donald Starrett, Safe and Accessible Travel Division. You're both very welcome to committee this morning. It's our first one out and about in quite a considerable time, so we're looking forward to our meeting this morning and what you have to say to us in relation to these statutory rules. So I could hand it over to you, gentlemen, to give your departmental briefing.
Thank you. If you're content, Chair, I'll just give a very quick brief, couple of opening remarks and then hand over to Donald to take you quickly through some of the key salient points. So we're here today to brief members, and so we're going to focus in on making time to answer questions. Obviously, we're here because there's been an impact of COVID, and there's been a delay to the 2019 taxi taxi fare review. It's departmental policy to review taxi fares every 2 years. So there was a desktop reviews taken out in May 2015 and in March 2017. Both of those recommended that there was not sufficient change to implement any adjustment to the maximum taxi fares. So the next scheduled review took place in 2019. We then had the impact of COVID, which delayed the ability for us to impact the 2019 review. Subsequent to that, the Minister has provided support to the taxi sector of £16.7 million through the two schemes and the regulatory support. Then it now gets us to the case where we're now looking at the implementation of the 2019 taxi review. So if I'll ask Donald now to take you through the key points.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think members have the briefing document there okay, but if I could just summarise maybe the key proposals. There's two key elements. First of those, as Chris has said, is the Minister's proposal to make regulations that will increase the maximum fare by 7.6%, and that's across the 4 rates. And then the second part is the financial support package for new taxi drivers to try and encourage drivers into the industry. In terms of the maximum fare, the document says that with a 4-week targeted consultation, there's a summary table in the briefing that summarises the responses received, and as opposed to note at the outset, there was no clear consensus around the proposal, which was a proposal for a 7.6% increase, so there wasn't clear consensus. There was, however, a majority of respondents who favoured an increase of at least that amount. Should say as well, though, that there were a number of issues and concerns that were raised, and again we've tried to summarise those in the briefing document. To do those justice, we'll need further analysis and really more comprehensive consideration, and the Minister has acknowledged that, and she's also acknowledged the fact, as Chris had said, that the consultation was based on 2019 data. And with that in mind, she's committed to do a further comprehensive review in the spring of 2022. That would be based on updated data and would give an opportunity to look a bit more closely at some of the issues that were raised in the consultation. I suppose for now, however, it's really a straight choice between whether we do nothing and do a comprehensive review looking at all the issues that were raised, or to implement a 7.6% increase. And in considering that, the Minister is mindful of the fact that there hasn't been an increase for some 5 years. So her decision then has been to, say, legislate for 7.6% uplift in the maximum fare for each of the 4 rates, to legislate for a free taximeter test, because to implement the maximum fare increase, all meters will need recalibrated, so to provide support for that, a free taximeter test, and then to initiate this more comprehensive review in spring 2022. There's 3 annexes to the briefing document. I've referred already to Annex 1, which summarises the consultation. Annex 2 then is the SL1 document, and it summarises what the regulations will do. Firstly, obviously, the 7.6% increase. Also, provision that will allow drivers to drive with an unsealed meter for a limited period, and the thinking behind that is that it's basically a time consideration to give them time to get the meter recalibrated, be working straight away, and then book their taximeter test and come in for that in due course, rather than have to rush in perhaps in the period before Christmas. And then and the regulations as well then providing, as I've said, for a free taximeter test. And then Annex 3 to the document really summarises the support package for new taxi drivers. That'll take the form of a payment of grant to drivers who come through the testing and licensing process in the current financial year. There'll be some drivers who are already partway through that, or indeed have completed that, and they'll be eligible for that grant, and it'll be paid that's payable under Section 51 of the Taxis Act 2008. that's really all I want to say at the outset, so happy to deal with any questions.
Okay, thank you both for your presentation this morning. And firstly, I suppose, probably looking at the taxi fare briefing, interesting in relation to the consultee response, quite disappointing actually in terms of the number of people that have. And I suppose probably what it says, firstly, what's your view on why there was such a small response rate, and would that be usual for a consultation in relation to taxi fares?
Joy, go on ahead.
Yeah, I think for all our consultations, the response rate does tend to vary. It's probably not. I suppose we anticipated a higher response, but it's not particularly unusual either.
I mean, this is supplemented by, we have had quite a few engagements between the Minister and officials. There's been 13 different engagements with representatives of the sector. So we have been talking directly to people who, both operators and drivers. So absolutely, it's disappointing that we didn't get, but it gave people the opportunity to have their say. And it is an indication also as well of the strength of feeling, you know, and so it would be so much better if we got more, but we've supplemented that with other information through meetings.
So how did the department decide on the 7.6 increase? What was the process you went through to come at that figure?
That's a desktop review.
Yeah, I suppose the methodology for the desktop review dates back to after the Taxis Act was brought in. There was a firm of consultants were commissioned to advise on this. They came up with the methodology that's is used for the desktop review. That has been used, as Chris said, every couple of years to review fares, and the first couple of reviews recommended no increase at that stage. The 2019 one, which was the most recent one we did, recommended 7.6% increase, and as Chris said, then the implementation of that was delayed because of COVID. So when the Minister came to look at this again and say during the recovery period, it was, we did look at should you do a more comprehensive review at the outset, and ideally that's what we would have done. However, that would have taken a bit of time. The responses that we have got here, the sort of things that have emerged from the consultation, shows that a comprehensive review would have to be conducted over some period of time. So the Minister, on balance, decided that she wanted to do something quickly, and therefore she went for the 7.6%, but with a commitment to look further.
So I suppose probably, and going by the consultee response, there appears to be a persistence to pursue the 7.6 despite, and given that there was such a small number of people who actually approved of that rate within the consultee responses. So I'm just wondering, the wider consultation piece that you talked about, Chris, in relation to the sector, what impact did they have on the decision-making process if there was so small a number of consultees that supported the 7.6? Was the sector in agreement with that, or was there differing?
There were different views from across the sector. Some wanted more than 7.6. Some and that was the underpinning, I think, motivation behind a more comprehensive review. The review fare recommendation mechanism is, if you like, it looks at a basket of cost inputs. So you've got things like fuel, car prices, a section for a wage for the person who does that. Insurance is a big. So, the major cost contributors are insurance, fuel, depot fees, vehicle maintenance, and those are updated. So what we have is evidence that those cost inputs have gone up for drivers. And what we had, essentially the choice in front of the Minister, was we've got evidence that says there was a 7.6% increase at that point in time. The belief is, among people that we've been talking with, is that is likely to be greater if we do a review now based on current prices, but there's no evidence for that. And so the evidence the Minister had was essentially the choice between do I do a 7.6 now, which is evidence based on that time and consulted on and has gone through the process, in the run-up to Christmas, which was a conscious time, because this is an opportunity for the industry to actually maximise its earning and earning potential through that time. So that's where that's what the choice came down to. But there was a mixed view, many of whom thought that actually the 7.6 wasn't wasn't sufficient.
Yeah, and I suppose one further point to that, the fare briefing. So a number indicated that they actually wanted a lower amount. So I was just wondering if you could maybe elaborate on the reason behind this. Is that because higher rates are driving some passengers away, or is there other reasons for that desire for a lower rate?
Well, I mean, the evidence is at the moment that there's not having a negative impact on the availability of passengers to take taxi fares. As you'd be aware, there's a lot of comment in the press about the shortage actually of drivers. The opposite. It's probably worth noting that this is the maximum fare, so companies or drivers are not obliged to charge that maximum fare, and we know that a lot of drivers don't, and we hear that there are regional variations where in the northwest people tend not to put up to the maximum fare that's available. So it is an option that drivers and companies can choose to implement. So people who don't want to implement the full fare, they have that choice. It's just those who do wish to implement the full fare have that choice.
Okay, and moving now to the Annex 3 and the support package, I think it's something broadly that the committee will welcome, because we have been consistently on record calling for a support package to be put in place for the industry, particularly to try and drive towards more young new entrants to the marketplace, given the pressures that they're facing at present. So can I ask, was the support package consulted on, and if so, what are the views of industry in relation to it?
So the consultation that took place was with the representatives of the industry through the discussions with both the Minister and officials. So that was the consultation process that was gone through, and the requirement, and also the voices of the committee as well, saying that a support package was, and there was a debate in the House as well. So there's been actually a lot of input through this into the Minister, and then the Minister was at the point where there had been a lot of input from the sector, and there was a need to put in place. So it is based on the evidence of that. So that was the consultation process that was run through before the Minister reached the decision to put this package in place. And
broadly speaking, the mechanisms that have been put in place and the measures that have been put in place, are industry supportive of those particular measures, or is there particular points that they would have liked to have seen that haven't been addressed yet, and maybe there's reasons for that? Could you elaborate on that?
So I think certainly there's probably a difference between operators and drivers. So operators are particularly focused on getting the supply of new drivers in, and which is understandable because that feeds their business model and also meets the needs of the community who the taxi industry serve. Taxi drivers are vocally keen on ensuring that the existing standards are maintained. So they don't want any dilution of the standards that exist for currently drivers in the industry. They are quite conscious of the fact that they are quite often dealing with vulnerable passengers, and so they are conscious as well that there is a need for the public to feel reassured that they are driving in a safe, in a safe setting. So there's probably, like many other things, it's a mixed view. What I would say is that this is the proposal that the Minister chose to go forward with is based on the costs that actually are incurred for new drivers entering the industry. So it's those things that are within the Minister's control. There's also a parallel here where, and we did have evidence in the consultation that we did for the fare review, although we didn't ask specifically the question. Some respondents took the opportunity to say that actually the reason why that they thought that one of the issues that they thought weren't being addressed were actually the attractiveness of the ability to make a living income. Now, obviously, with the Minister, she can address that through the maximum fare, which is the proposal that is in front of members now. But also, there's the fact that people are saying the depot fees can be off-putting. So there are push and pull factors for potential drivers, both the attractiveness of working in the industry and the costs that are incurred. But as I said, those costs incurred, reflected in the fee, are being made up of fuel, insurance and largely depot fees. So some have raised the fact that depot fees are a concern for them as well. So there's a range of elements, but certainly drivers were very keen on the existing standards being maintained.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up to my members for questions. So I can go to Andrew, please, and then Kathleen Boylan.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming along. The think the key issue for me is around the whole industry is about being able to attract and retain talent and employees. And there's a real issue there because the level of earnings that you can get as a result of it is serious. And during the pandemic, you can remember the situation where very little support was there, and taxi ranks sitting there for taxi drivers sitting there for hours on end with no work at all. So people obviously have left the industry as a result of that. There's two sides to the fare increase. One is that obviously there's people who are socially deprived are quite heavily reliant upon taxis as a way to get around. So we need to be conscious of that, but we also need to make sure that there's a service there to access in the first place. So I think the 7.6% rise, while it's welcome that that option will be there, it's disappointing that, like today we've heard that inflation was 4.2% in the last period of time. So, you know, we're not catching up here with the price rises and the pressures upon businesses and stuff like that. So the question would really be, is there any assurances we can get that we can get this in place and get this rolled out so that it can actually be enacted for the Christmas period, and see this review in spring 2022? How long is that going to take? Because we're going to need to make sure that we're having a price arrangement in place for taxis that is enabling the businesses to be able to operate and attract people into it, because we hear from other sectors around being able to attract people. But the best thing is good terms and conditions of employment and being able to make a decent living through it all.
Yeah, in terms of the regulations, they're at an advanced stage of drafting now. We're hopeful actually they'll be operational next week. That's what we're working towards. So hopefully maybe by Wednesday of next week, but certainly by the end of the week, that is the target. Sorry, the other point.
The other one's just, well, this is a follow-on from that. Obviously the fare machines, whatever, need to be updated. Yeah. So what's the timescales and how you're going to engage to facilitate that? And also this review in spring 2022, how long is that going to take? Because I think the sooner that can come, the better.
Okay. In terms of the communication, DVA are already looking at communicating with the industry, and that will be around, well, obviously highlighting the fact that the fares will increase and communicating that to both the taxis and to the meter manufacturers. And then the next thing will be for the drivers to get their meters recalibrated. Yeah. And the idea behind allowing them to operate with a unsealed meter for a period is that obviously that can be done quickly and if possible before Christmas. And what the regulations will provide for is that whenever, say, a vehicle's due its annual vehicle inspection, normally whenever we look at the inspection, DVA will expect the meter to be sealed. In this case, they'll inspect it with an unsealed meter, provided that the driver or the owner has made an application for the taxi meter test, so they can see that's in train, and so that's what will happen. And then in terms of the comprehensive review, and I do take the point about doing that as quickly as possible. I suppose the issue is that this consultation has raised a number of issues which have to be addressed as best we can. So that may mean it will take a little bit longer, but I think that's where we are at the moment.
The point you made and I picked up on was one that was reflected by both MTAP and the Consumer Council whenever they said, so you hit the nail on the head by saying, you know, the fares go up, but without fares going up, perhaps there isn't availability for people who are deprived. So it is a balancing act. I think that the timescale for the comprehensive review will take time. Okay. So it probably,
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Go to Cathal Boylan, please.
Thank you, Chair. You gentlemen, you're very welcome. Donald, you're welcome back again. No, I mean, we seem a wee bit conflicted because, I mean, I'm concerned about the 3.2% that actually responded out of 6,000. That has to be totally reflected, because I know firms have come to me already, and I'm going to meet them obviously this week, especially some of the single operators out there now. I don't per se have an issue with the 7.6, although I do agree with Andrew in terms of accessibility and how people meet that. I don't want it all shrouded in the COVID thing, because unfortunately we've had 2 attempts to, the model says don't raise or don't increase, and now all of a sudden COVID's been here and now we're increasing. And it's like a fight, you know. I mean, I don't want that reflected, but it's not. We're doing it because you know, the model's reading and that's what we're saying, as opposed to a COVID recovery. So I don't want that conflicted in that way.
Could I just clarify that? So the COVID didn't impact the information for the fares review was all fed into the model before the impact of COVID. So the 2019 fare increase is a pre-COVID costing model. So the reason why it wasn't implemented was because we were busy doing the taxi support schemes.
No,
so,
appreciate it.
So it's just
appreciate it, but it's how we get the message out.
Yeah.
Just how the industry reflects that. That's all I mean, is that we will have that conversation, but it's key how we get that message out to the general public. My point, and I want to just, the chair's asked a number of questions. See, in terms of, there's a lot of other issues cited there, like the depot costs and the radio site and radio costs and everything else. And they did ask for a full review. They've been saying that. Why did we not take the opportunity to do the full review now? I know the minister's responded to say she wasn't minded to go down that route at this point in time. Why clearly have we not decided to do that? Because there's other underlying factors within the consultation.
I suppose just to pick up, there are a number of issues, and depot costs is one of them, Cathal, that's beyond our control. So that's not specifically an issue for the department. But the reasons for not doing the review was quite simply time. Because it would have taken time to do a comprehensive review, to pull all the information together, and it would have been well after Christmas before that could have been completed. So that was a consideration. The minister did look at that and discuss that with officials, but that was the reason.
No, and I appreciate, Donald, like I said, it's how the message got out, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, and we'll hear different opinions. The point also is we have only a certain percentage responded to this, but we're still, and I do support this, trying to support drivers in the industry, but we're saying 1 minute there's only 3% responded to the consultation out of 6,000, and then we're encouraging drivers in the industry. The question has to be asked, why did more people not respond to the consultation? So that's it. But I just want to go on. You say here £372 supports,
yes,
and then also 140 for the licensing. Is that plus, or is that all in the one cost?
No, the breakdown. It's the theory is 34, and the practical test is 60. So that's 94 for the testing, and then the taxi driver's license is £140, and the taxi vehicle test is 133.50. So it's included in that 372. So it's basically covering the costs associated with the testing and licensing process.
Sorry, Chair. I think I just had one more. Well, maybe I have one more point, Chair. I think that'll do for now.
We'll come back to you if you
but
Liz Cummins.
might have another point.
Thanks, Chair. And I mean, a lot of questions have been covered. I suppose just to follow on from some of the stuff in relation to the level of response.
Sure.
In terms of the review in spring, then, have you been able to look at it and say why so little responded? I know Cathal sort of touched on this as well, and how we could maybe look at ensuring that in the more comprehensive review you're seeing a larger level of engagement, because I know certainly from the engagement we've all had with the industry over COVID, which has exposed probably a lot of these issues. I know some of them were pre-existing, but I think when the chips were down, and these people who are frontline workers providing essential services, and I know no one will argue with that, we have seen kind of the pressures they were under, which have been further emphasised at times when business was really low, for want of a better word. But it's just to say, certainly the engagement we've had, we've seen that there's definitely an appetite out there to feed in their views. So, have we recognised where the pitfalls were, or where the barriers to getting people to respond were, that we could look at for the comprehensive review? And will it be a root and branch review? Is that what we're talking? That will look at all of the issues affecting the industry.
Sorry, do you?
Well, on the issue about the response rate, which again I recognise is very disappointing. We'll need to look at seeing how we can get. What we did was we wrote to every taxi licence holder and contacted them, as well as. So I mean, honestly, I'm not quite sure what the answer to that is. I know we can have a look at it again, and we'll apply our minds to how we best get that sort of. But we also do, as I said, do augment it with so people do engage. There are people who are very engaged, and and they engage with officials, and I know they engage with members. What I can say is, if there's anything that you can say, by the way, it would really help as well if you have your say whenever the department's doing anything. I mean, sorry, being shamelessly asking, but
The approach we took this time was to put the consultation on citizen space, which is more and more what is happening. That has been the approach, which is kind of a learning curve for officials too. But I mean, if for example, if that's not reaching people, that's something that we need to know, and we can react to that.
Yeah.
No, I suppose, look, I mean, I don't have all the answers. I suppose it's just trying to get a sense if there's something that maybe you were able to identify looking at that. And certainly, I think, I'd say all the members here would agree that anything we can do to publicise and promote the consultation, encourage people to engage with it, I think is very important. Just in another question in terms of the grant support that the Minister has announced in terms of the fees. Obviously, as many others have said here, there's other impacts now on the sector in terms of rising fuel costs. Is there any plans for the department to look at support around that to help drivers with rising costs on in terms of fuel and things like that, to try and offset some of those as we move on? I suppose we're still living through these difficult times with COVID. I would say business levels haven't returned to where they were, but costs are rising, and I know there are obviously the price increase, but as others have said, it's still fairly limited in terms of inflation.
I think as Chris had said earlier, the fuel costs is reflected in the maximum fare, so that is one of the costs that we're looking to cover. I mean, it's fair comment that it's based on 2019 data, and we need to look at, and fuel costs are going up. We know that, so that will certainly need to be considered in the next review.
That'll be the mechanism whereby the impact of those fuel cost rises will be fed through into the money that the taxi drivers can make. So that's the mechanism specifically that will allow that to happen. Which is why I think that people who were saying actually we need an updated one, and it was because the fact that they do know that there have been cost increases in those input factors since the last review.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Roy Beggs.
Again, thanks for your briefing. The whole issue kicked off in my mind because of we ourselves, no doubt the department, were made aware of a shortage of taxi drivers and the difficulties that can cause to the economy and to the public. And so it's right that market forces need to change to encourage greater availability and more people to come into the industry and provide the service. But no one wants to pay more money. Let's be frank about it. But at the same time, if you were stuck and needed a taxi, I don't think too many people would quibble about paying a little bit more to get a taxi when you need it. So you've said it's 5 years prior to 2019, the last increase. So clearly there's been considerable inflation during that period, and the evidence has shown there is a need for an increase, and I think the idea of a 7.6 as a minimum increase would be appropriate. And given recent fuel increases, there may even be a need for more than that. My question is, why is there not an annual review or a biannual review, so it's done very regularly, and there'd be smaller incremental changes to keep costs in tune with market forces and the need for perhaps attracting more people into the market?
Yeah, I think the last increases were either in 2015 or 2016. I think it was the last time the fares were increased. There was a 2017 fare review, but it didn't recommend an increase at that time, and then 2019 again did. and said it's the 2019 one that we have reacted to. So there is provision, and the department does. Its policy is to look at it every 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. You said there was a review in 2019. That's almost 2 years ago. Why has it taken so long to go from a review process to actually implementing the recommendation?
COVID.
Pardon?
COVID.
I think, as Chris had said, the focus, and there has been a lot of focus around COVID support for taxi drivers in particular.
So the team that would normally have been doing the process of putting in place the taxi review were the same team that put in place the two schemes for the taxi support mechanism. So the minister prioritised the support packages for the sector. So that was the impact that had. It was a matter of prioritisation of the best of the support to the industry, and there was a lot of support for the immediate intervention that the two support packages took place. And at the time, of course, if you think of the balance of priorities, the issue wasn't that the drivers weren't making sufficient money from the fares. In fact, they weren't getting any fares, so they needed support so they could be here for us whenever the sector picked up.
Thanks for that. Can I ask what assessment has been made of the availability of taxis, particularly late at night and the early hours of the morning at weekends? So has the department been reviewing the length of time that people that may have to queue at those times, and the effect that may have on the public and on businesses?
I think it's probably been common knowledge that that there is a shortage of taxis, and the department completely accepts that. We're doing what we can to try and encourage more drivers into the industry. The support package is a step in that direction, and really, I suppose, open to considering if there are any other obstacles that.
Yeah. Can I ask, is there a need to review the taxi class availability during those peak hours when the current system cannot cope? To bring in other taxi groups that would be able to assist the public at home?
That certainly could be an option. Again, it would require legislative change. It would require consultation, so it wouldn't be a quick fix. But it is something that could be looked at. Yes.
And then finally, I noticed that there's different rates at different times, limits, etc. Is there a need to adjust those rates to incentivise more drivers to operate beyond sociable hours and reward them appropriately for that? So are you looking at giving a particular increase to those times where you know that there is a shortage?
That's certainly something that came out from the consultation, that creating a differential between the rates, a greater differential than there currently is. So that is something that will be addressed in the spring review, yes.
Yeah.
So you're not proposing it in this initial increase?
This proposal will uplift each rate by 7.6%, so it will maintain the current differential.
Okay, and just how long is this new review going to take? Because it's important that it is over a timely period. It's a reasonably short period.
It probably would take several months, and it's unlikely to be completed within this mandate. Is probably the honest answer, because of the complexity of the issues that you have raised, and as Mr. Muir has also raised, there are the equality impacts of it as well. The fact that there are some people who disproportionately rely on it. There's actually quite a lot of things that we need to think our way through, consult on, and take a view on. So just to do that process properly is just going to take.
Mr. Chairman, I support going with the increase that's been recommended. They need something fast. Taxi drivers need something fast, as do the public, to encourage more drivers in.
Okay, thank you, Roy. I suppose probably I'm just following on from some of the comments that have been made, and you mentioned, Donald, that it's common knowledge that there's issues out there in relation to a shortage of taxi drivers. Been mentioned, trailed in the media, trailed in the Assembly, in the committee, and I don't think anybody is in any doubt that the department are aware of that, as you've mentioned, and want to try to address that in any way they seem necessary. I suppose probably as committee members, and it's been hit on by most members in relation to the very small number that responded to the consultation. And I think probably we're trying to square the two, because that could lead us as a committee to feel, is there a level of disconnect between the department, who are ambitious in trying to solve the problem, and an inability really to assess the needs and bring an industry with them to try and find sustainable solutions. Because with the 3% in the consultation, I don't think, and I think members would maybe agree with me on this, I've never found a taxi man yet that doesn't want to talk to you. I've never met one yet that's not prepared. I've never met one. Yeah.
I'll give you your views.
I've never met one. Choice of words. You know, I've never met one yet that doesn't have a strong opinion on a matter of
Or an opinion. Just opinion will do.
Yeah. So I suppose this is where I'm leading with this, is that, you know, how come we have a situation where so few respond to something like this? And it's actually just was brought to my attention. You know, so obviously you use citizen space as a mechanism. So was that appropriate? And what percentage of taxi drivers have access to a computer? Because maybe this is factoring in. Maybe there's ways in which the department need to look about how actually they're engaging with the industry to ensure that we're getting a reflective view, and that we as a committee can be confident that yes, the department have a desire to address the issues, but with a level of you know, it's not weighing up in our from what I can see in terms of the response rate and the desire to address the issues.
And I know in terms of citizen space generally, I mean, and the government has moved towards that, and the idea has been to increase the number of responses we do get to consultations. And in general terms, my understanding is that has worked. Doesn't necessarily mean it works for every sector, but and certainly we can look at that if that's an issue. I'm not sure whether it's an issue or not, but certainly we can look at it.
Do we have a percentage of taxi drivers that have access to a computer? Has that question ever been asked?
Well, we do know that whenever we were running the grant schemes, they required an online application, and
Jesus, Chris, getting better.
and. There was a universal application, so yeah, it's.
So this is starting to tease these questions out. Yeah. It's just, you know, they're important to a committee to ensure that the reviews are being accurately reflected and that the actions taken match up with the needs of the industry. Cathal Boylan, you had a further question. You want?
I did, Chair, and thanks very much for that. Because Chair, that's the crux of it. I mean, when the COVID payments were handed out, every man, woman, and child, and every dog in the state was claiming for COVID payments. The taxi lobby, in my experience, and I'm sorry I didn't get a taxi out of here in 2007, because the taxi lobby has been a very, very strong lobby, the taxi industry, and it's surprising, and that's why I've asked it, and the Chair's reiterated the point. I mean, Donald, 3% out, you know, and I appreciate, I'll say on record again, I appreciate the support to the new drivers, and I appreciate all the stories about drivers not being available. But there's 6,000 there on the list, and we haven't encouraged anyway. But we encouraged, if we had to use the COVID list and the payments, then we would have seen. But back to where we're at this point. Just in terms, I take it there's an inflationary element to the modelling, yeah. In terms,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of the inflation. One is, the point for me is, how does this then impact, how is all the regions going about it in terms of, have you looked across all the models across all the regions to see, are they using the same, or is it reflective?
I know that, I mean, that is probably so yes, if you're looking at the taxi fares, essentially the inputs are the big chunky inputs that are used across various regions, because it's fuel and insurance are they're the big things. Certainly if we're doing a more comprehensive review, that was looked at as part of the consultation exercise that set up the model that we update, you know, for the two yearly reviews. But if we're looking at a more comprehensive review in the spring, we would need to, I think, look at, you know, we would need to look at that. That would be one of the issues, that because it has been raised as part of the consultation about the weighting of these things. So I think that would probably be a legitimate area for further investigation.
Okay, on just my final point, see the review, it has to be root and branch and comprehensive, because there is a need for the taxi industry. We've seen that clearly. We've also an element of our work is about the decarbonisation, and the taxi industry is going to play a big part in that, especially in the urban settings, to get the cars off the road. So, as part of public transport, we would like to see, as part of the overall review, besides all the elements that's been mentioned in the consultation, anything outside the box, because it'll be interesting when we go back to talk to the taxi industry, the number of people who said who weren't inclusive in this one way or another. I don't, because we will be asking down how they were contacted, because my first port of call would have been the COVID payments.
That was what we used.
You know what I mean? Because I'm sure there's more than 3%. But listen, I would like to just see a more comprehensive view. Our chair would ask that yourself and ourselves be included in the terms of reference to that review to ensure that it's fully comprehensive and representative of the industry.
Okay, and Dr. Hughes, I think you wanted to come back on that.
Sorry. Yeah.
Just on the contacting, we did use the same mechanism for contacting people for this survey as we did to alert them to the grants. It was just obviously people were more motivated to apply for the van.
As long as we have that to go back.
And that is an issue, and it is one that we would. And actually, I mean, as I said to Ms. Kemmons as well, I mean, in all seriousness, whenever we are engaging with the sector in these ways, and I know that members, if you have any ideas as to how we go about that, because previously a committee, the committee has raised, and we have looked at, increasing the rural element of people. So that is something that we've raised, and it's useful feedback that we then, of course, take and act on. So if there are any other suggestions that members have, that we would be very welcome as to how to increase our reach. And whenever you are talking to representatives, if they're not already engaging with us, and I know many possibly are, and that's fantastic. If there are other people, just the message to be got out, that the more we can do that, the better.
Well, gentlemen, I don't think there's any other questions from the floor. So at this stage, can I thank you both? Oh, sorry, Liz, do you have a question?
Just a small point on that. I think it is important that even through our engagement that we're able to ensure that representatives can feed into drivers and things how important it is. When you're it is about motivating people. So if people feel that it's going to be looking at issues that are important to them. I mean, already I just had a wee look there. There's a statement out saying we're discussing this morning. There's no mention of it being from 2019. So it's already, you can see a wee bit of a debate forming on whether they should go up in terms of the taxi fares. So I think it's about making sure that people understand that if they don't get their say, they might not be happy with the outcome. Yeah. And I think that's a key point to be making, and maybe reflecting the types of things that we want to hear about. It's only a suggestion, but it's about triggering people's attention and engaging them that way. So that's just my talk as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning. It was certainly a useful presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, that was a useful briefing. I think members' points well put across. And at this stage, I suppose probably I'm going to read the statutory rule again before I ask if members are content. I know it was proposed. So you can see it at page 69 of your pack, which is the SL1, the taxi meters, devices and maximum fares, Amendment Regulation, Northern Ireland 2021. Are members content with the proposals for the statutory rule? Content. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to agenda item number 9. Before I do, could I welcome George Robinson to the meeting this morning. We're now going to have a briefing from Wrightbus. They're not at the table yet, but I don't know if there is a copy of the presentation, because George, you might want a copy of it. We'll see if we can get you a copy of the presentation.
Yep.
And we'll wait until we watch it.
Apologies, Chair.
No problem. No, don't worry. Morning.
Morning. Thanks, Steve. Morning.
I can give you a couple of minutes, gentlemen, to get set up there if you don't.
No, we're okay.
You're ready to go?
We are good to go.
Okay, well listen, at this stage, can I welcome you both to the committee's meeting this morning. We're very excited to be out and about again as a committee, and one of the first stops in which we wanted to come was to Ballymena. Obviously there's been a lot of exciting conversations in relation to Wrightbus and the developments, and certainly we as a committee, we're very keen to hear from you down in your heartland, and hopefully go for a visit thereafter to see the exciting work that's going on. So can I welcome Mr Neil Collins, Managing Director at Wrightbus, and Mr John McLeser, Sales Director at Wrightbus. You're both very welcome to the committee this morning, and at this stage could I hand over to you to give the committee a presentation, and then there will be an opportunity for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to present this morning. If we can roll on through to the slide number 3. So we're obviously a global manufacturer of both double-deck and single-deck buses. We're headquartered here in Ballymena, but we also have a factory and an office in Malaysia to service the Southeast Asian markets. We provide buses into Hong Kong, Malaysia and Singapore as well. And we also have aftermarket teams based in country, so we have them right through Ireland and the UK, as well as in Hong Kong, Malaysia and Singapore as well. So a truly international business from that point of view. We've 75 years of engineering heritage here in Ballymena, started back in 1946, and we are seeing a huge transmission within our business away from low emission diesel products now into zero emissions buses, and we did provide 1,000 buses to London in the new Route Master model. We transitioned in Ballymena from being someone who took a chassis from an outside supplier to now developing our own chassis. So everything is vertically integrated within our business. So we take raw metal, we cut, bend, paint it, and then we marry that in with bought-in components to make a finished bus. The other thing that's allowed us to do is to develop new products from the ground up. So our zero emissions vehicles are built as true zero emissions vehicles, rather than us trying to squeeze battery packs and hydrogen fuel cells into existing diesel chassis. We've done that from the ground up. So while the factory was furloughed during COVID, our design teams continued to work from home to get these new design of buses across into production. We relocated to what was the old JTI factory here in Ballymena back between 2018 and 2019, although we do retain the existing factory for welding and cutting and painting, the dirty processing. So given we now have 90 acres, we're really well future-proofed and we're able to grow very effectively. The business, as was well documented, went into administration back in 2019 and was purchased by Joe Bamford of the Bamford JCB family in October 2019, so we've just celebrated our second birthday under the new management regime. And we launched, which was a huge thing for us, the world's first hydrogen double-decker bus came out, was designed, developed and built in Ballymena. If we move on to the next slide, that's just an overview where you can see the size of the site. In the top right-hand corner of the picture is the old factory, which is about a mile from the headquarters, where, as I said, we do our welding and painting. And then within the old JTI site, we assemble chassis. We have our own composite manufacturing facility, our final assembly lines and our finishing lines, with a great scope there for expansion as we grow the business going forward. So, as you can see now on slide 7, if you flick to slide 7, there's a sort of roadmap of where the business has come from, founded back in 1946, and developed numerous models under the Wrightbus family, right through to the unfortunate administration. The key issue for us is that we are making this transition to zero emissions. So this year we will build 30% of our buses as zero emissions, and in 2021, 70% of what we build out of the factory will be zero emissions. So that change is happening right now, and that drive to zero emissions that we're supplying buses from here in Ballymena across Ireland and the UK. On to slide 8, we have very close links with both local universities. We're doing some hydrogen work with the University of Ulster, but we also have a joint venture called WTech, the Bamford Technology Centre, with Queen's University. We have 22 employees there at various stages of their university education, from undergraduates to people who are doing their PhDs to postdoctoral research. And we're doing a lot of work there in and around powertrains, the move to zero emissions, autonomous vehicles, but we're also working with their sociology department to look at why bus patronage is falling and what can we as a bus manufacturer do to help bus operators drive up bus patronage going forward. We're also working with their biomedical people in regard to, if people are travelling on buses every day and for a long time, what can we do from a design point of view to make that journey more comfortable and more pleasant. So it's a very, very key piece of what we do. We also have dry cycle modelling development through there, so we're able to take the route a bus runs. We're then able to model that very accurately, and we're then able to tell the bus operators whether they need a bus that has 3 strings of battery in it, 4 strings of battery, or it needs hydrogen, depending on how hilly the route is, how many stops there are, how fast the bus runs on the route. And this has been very useful for us. We're doing these modelling for a lot of our customers, and then we can go in with pricing off the back of that. So that's proved very, very useful selling tool for us, and we've developed that in conjunction with Queen's. So I'll pass over to John now. I'll talk about sales.
Okay, thank you. As you know, my name is John McLeister, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about our customers, the challenges they face, and maybe talk through some of our product range and what's the differentiator between a Wrightbus and the rest, if you like. I've been with Wrightbus for 30 years, 31 years actually, almost 32, and so pretty much grew up in the world of bus. So it's something I'm very passionate about. So our existing on slide, I think that's number 9. On slide 9, you'll see a list of some of the large operators across the UK and Ireland. And further afield, we also have 2 key customers in Hong Kong. We have a large presence in Singapore, where we still are in discussions with the Land Transport Authority in Singapore. And further afield, more recently in Tokyo, where we've launched open-top vehicles with Hatobus. And so the brand is much larger than just the UK and Ireland. So the next slide, if you skip to slide 11, we have quite a comprehensive product offering. We are the only bus manufacturer in the UK and Ireland that can provide the full suite of zero-emission buses, both on double and single-decker platforms. So we refer to it as our street deck, and that's our marketing name for double-decker vehicles. And from the left, you can see the Hydroliner fuel cell electric vehicle, and that was developed as part of a JIVE joint initiative and a European initiative at the time. We currently have almost 100 of these vehicle types in service in operation across UK and Ireland. Indeed, Belfast has a few of them, as well as Dublin. And we are in further discussions to see further deployment of hundreds more, potentially, over the next few years, and working very closely with some of the transport authorities in the UK as part of the UK government Zebra scheme. And we're involved in many of those discussions in relation to zero emissions, but also with our Hydroliner. The fuel cell and how it works is very similar to a diesel. So unlike our battery electric, you don't need to plug it in overnight. You just fill it up with gas and you drive it as you would with a diesel bus. So the technology is somewhat, whilst it's new and it's slightly different, the behaviours are the same, and this is what makes it attractive to some of the operators. As we move away from a long legacy of diesel and diesel technicians, the transitional shift to hydrogen is much lesser than would be in terms of an electric and the technology that holds. And we'll talk about some of the issues that our customers have when looking at hydrogen or electric. So our Electroliner, again, based on a common platform, and why that is unique and why that's important is for the larger groups that we just looked at, like the Revas and the First Groups, who have multiple depots across the UK. In some of those depots, the electric vehicle may be more suitable based on the duty cycles and the routes that those vehicles are doing, where in other regions, specifically more urban areas potentially, then the hydrogen would be much more of a suitable product. We're very agnostic in terms of which product they need, and as Neil mentioned, we look at the advisory tools at our disposal within Queen's to help them make that decision. But both of these vehicles they hold about 85 to 90% of commonality of parts. So when you look at a group procurement process, there is much advantage and a lot of efficiencies that can be gained by having a Wrightbus, whether it be electric or hydrogen, in their overall group fleet. So here in Belfast, we have sold both electric and hydrogen, but for TransLink, the gains will be seen as they run both products, and when they're having to replace parts, if there's damage, accidents, etc., it's one part that fits both of the product types. So they're not having to keep two different types of parts in stock in their warehouse or the procurement teams. So that's a USP for us, that we're the only manufacturer who has a common platform that can provide a hydrogen drivetrain or electric battery drivetrain. But most importantly for the customers, there's no compromise. There's no compromise in terms of seating capacity, in terms of number of seats, and for cities like London, it's imperative that they can maximise the number of passengers that they can carry on the bus at any one time. And so having that lightweight technology, and one of the advantages of having an integral design build, that we can design both the chassis and the body to a structural integrity level that also allows to high passenger capacity without any fear of chassis fatigue or cracking of the body, etc. And so when a passenger would jump into one of our vehicles, it's just a bus. It's the same number of seats and the same layout that they're used to if they've taken a diesel bus a day before. We also do still manufacture our Euro 6 Ultraliner, which is our diesel, and it's our latest Daimler engine, latest variant, which carries best in class in terms of fuel efficiency. And again, a lot of those commonality of parts that carry across all of our street deck platform. So in the next slide, slide 12, you can see how we have endeavoured to accomplish the seating capacity, the seating layout, how we keep the weight down, and it's all about how we package the auxiliary products that makes up our hydrogen vehicle. So you can see there just a very impression of where the tanks, if you look at the rear of the vehicle and up the back of the bus, you'll see green tanks, and that's what carries the hydrogen, and that allows then up to 250 miles of range on a full tank without any requirement for opportunity charging or top-up. And then we have positioned in mind of the maintenance in terms of access and the most efficient driveline possible, including electric power steering, which is a standard across the industry. At all times, safety is paramount, and so with many of our tenders and our proposals to customers, it carries with it a level of bespoke product. So each customer, each region will have a specific specification, and many of those are and around safety in terms of whether it be camera systems, CRM systems, which is a camera mirror instead of having wing mirrors, therefore not hitting cyclists and so on, and so we can incorporate that into all of our product range. Slide 13 then shows our single deck, and as I said at the start of this presentation, that we are the only manufacturer who can provide both single and double on a hydrogen or electric platform. And again, it's about, and it shares the same chassis, or very similar chassis to that of the street deck and our double deck. And so for both double deck, single deck, hydrogen, electric, you have that commonality, and that's a strong USP when it comes to total cost of ownership. And so one of the challenges that I have in terms of trying to sell and in terms of sales and developing customer awareness is that it's not just the initial ticket price of that vehicle. Much like if you're buying a car, you buy a car and you want to understand how much will it cost me to service this vehicle, how much will it cost me to run this vehicle. And for these units, it's the same. And so having that commonality is key. Fast refueling time, so we can refuel these single deckers and double decker buses in around 6 to 8 minutes, which is slightly more than a diesel, but it's not a showstopper. And that is in comparison to electric, where some of our competitors are charging their vehicles for 7 or 8 hours. We can charge ours in between 2 and 5 hours, depending on the battery pack and depending on the application. So for the hydrogen hydroliner, on a single deck, our vehicles can run up to 640 miles, and that's much more than the diesel counterpart. And so this is a product that has got the marketplace very, very excited. Our double deck has been in the market, and it's been proven to work in Aberdeen. It's in Dublin, it's in Belfast, and we're learning all the time as we run these new vehicles, remembering it's the first of its kind in the world. The battery electric vehicles have been around for many, many years, so we're only improving what's already there. For us, the hydrogen was the first double deck, and we're learning from that all the time, and we're using some of that knowledge in terms of our single decker. And so again, having the capacity to carry up to 90 passengers for 640 miles is something that's very alluring to our customer base. Our electroliner, which we will be producing next year, can be charged in 2 to 5 hours, depending on the battery pack, and can run up to 300 miles. And that in itself is the best in class. There's no other electric vehicle available today that can be charged in such a short space of time and can run without having to be topped up. And we can do that because we have more space to put batteries on the roof as well as in the chassis and the chassis floor pan. Oh, you're right. That's right. And then finally, on slide 14, we have our diesels. And so for some customers and our operators, the challenge that they have is how do they transition from having a diesel product across to having electric or hydrogen. And for some of the smaller retail operators, it's just a step too far just now, and they need to replace product. So we have retained in our portfolio a range of diesel, very, very clean, ultra low emission vehicles. So the Euro 6, and they carry with it what we call a ULEV certificate. So it's an ultra low emission vehicle certificate that proves that it runs in a very clean. So, for example, one of our ultraliners are actually more cleaner on the environment than a new diesel BMW or Audi car. So they're extremely clean and using the latest Daimler technology. And we have retained those, and you'll see some of those on the road early next year. And with the Education Authority, we have sold some of those more recently to Education Authority. I would like to see some more of those on the road. So yellow buses, JCB colour, couldn't have been better. And that's our product range. One of the challenges that we have, but also the opportunity, is with the zero emissions. With a diesel, you appreciate, like a car, you buy a diesel bus, and I mentioned a few times that we use a Daimler engine. Some of our competitors would use a Cummins engine, and so with each engine variant, you have diagnostic equipment that you need to service and maintain that vehicle, much like the car industry. So we have customers that that are loyal to us because they opt for a Wrightbus or they opt for a Daimler product, and they have invested in their people to understand that engine variant and the diagnostics. With the zero emissions, it gives us a new opportunity to win new new customers, they have to make the change. So they have to look at what's best for their organisation, and they have to look at how they can integrate that more efficiently going forward. So it's an opportunity for us to look at new customs. Tomorrow we are hosting a guest from Scotland, and it's been a long time since we have sold buses to Scotland because our nearest rival competitor is based in Scotland. And so we have an opportunity tomorrow to speak with one of the large groups to look at our product range, whereby if they're going to do it, they want to do it right, and they want to look at what the right product and the right products are for their organisation. And that's an opportunity for us. That's an opportunity for us to gain new ground and to break new ground. So with Wrightbus, we look at how we can collaborate, not just with our customer base, but also internally. And I was just saying to you earlier, in our industry, you can't really fly solo. You have to have partners, you have to have support in place. And so in the form of JCB, we were able to get that, having a common shareholder. And some of the synergies that we have found with JCB is that we both manufacture, we've both been manufacturing for 75 years. And whilst they're leading in terms of the construction side, there has been opportunities for them to learn off us in terms of hydrogen, because we had started that journey much longer than they have taken on. But they've caught up fairly quickly, and that has been due to the engineering excellence that we have here in the province, both in Queen's and here in Wrightbus. And so there has been joint opportunities joint projects between Wrightbus and JCB from day one, and that has culminated now in a launch of new products for JCB. But likewise, we have gleaned from them the best in terms of world-class manufacturing. And one of the systems that JCB deployed 15 years ago, and they currently monitor, I'm not sure the numbers,
1 million.
1 million units across the world on a daily basis, is their telematics. And what telematics is a system that can be much like you have in your car, and your dashboard can light up and tell you when your tire's flat. This system will tell you when your tire's about to go flat. And that's the difference between their telematics system that they have. And now we've adopted that onto our vehicles. So all of our new zero-emission products have telematics fitted. So the buses you see in Belfast will have telematics. And we have a team of software engineers who will monitor the progress, the efficiency, the driving behaviours of each of our new buses. And we can see the efficiency of the hydrogen vehicles. We can see what range they're getting from each individual charge in terms of electric. We can see how heavy the braking is on the vehicles. And we can use that data to store and to inform maintenance intervals in terms of how many times the vehicle needs to come off the road to be maintained, or if indeed there is a warning about to happen, we can alert the driver. We can send text messages to the garage operations managers. So there's many facets to what the telematics can do. And this, again, is proving very unique in our industry for operators, where we can supply information, real-time information, to allow their vehicles to stay on the road. And that's why we call it Uptime 365. And that is a new initiative that we've launched just this year at one of the major shows. So Uptime 365 is a unique USP for us against our competitors. Then Rise Hydrogen is another sister company is a company that's also owned by Joe Bamford. And Rise, put very plainly, they provide hydrogen and infrastructure to support the transition into zero emissions in terms of hydrogen. And so they're uniquely positioned in the UK. They currently hold the contract for transport for London. So we provide the bus, Rise provide the fuel and the infrastructure and all the maintenance, and we run those vehicles. And that is as a template that we can then replicate across various parts of Ireland and indeed the UK. And so with the Zebra funding that has been launched by the government, has enabled us to sit alongside operators and sit alongside the transport authorities when they submit their bids, that they know that they have a manufacturer, that they have an infrastructure experts, and they have fuel experts. I just keep going.
I hope that guy's not working on the hydrogen.
I think somebody's doing that. It's probably an ADL guy in there trying to put me off.
You sent a starter on the run there.
So the collaboration between RISE and Wrightbus has been very strong from day one, and then obviously with JCB as well has set us apart in terms of our manufacturing capability. So we know that when we go to our operators, the challenges that they face, the challenges not just in terms of the product type, but also in terms of training, infrastructure, how do you maintain this infrastructure? It's a whole new different realm for them in terms of having to have refueling stations of a different system, or charging stations in their depots, and we're there to provide that support from well to wheel, if you like. Excuse me. So HiCap then is basically the Bamford family are committed to reducing carbon across all of their businesses, and in terms of, and to do that they require investment, and we have been fortunate enough to potentially see some of that investment in Wrightbus that has enabled us to accelerate our engineering capability, and therefore put vehicles onto the, new product launches, if you like. So last year we launched 3 new vehicles, and we hope to launch another 3 next year. So in that regard, we are at the forefront, and we're leading those discussions with JCB and RISE, and then with the investment opportunity with HiCap, allows us now to bring yet another element to the discussions in terms of finance, in terms of off-balance sheet finance, and being able to lease vehicles. And for the first time in the history of Wrightbus, we're able to afford our operators an opportunity to lease buses as opposed to an outright buy, and that's something that has really allowed operators to take stock of what we can offer in terms of being more than just a bus provider.
Okay. So on slide 17, we've actually repositioned the business so that we're not just seen now as someone who builds buses. We want to be an end-to-end service provider for the industry. So as John has touched on, through RISE, you've got planning, infrastructure and fuel availability. Finance through FUSE, which is funding for zero emissions, another sister company. The bus built here in Ballymena, or in some cases in Malaysia. And then our aftercare team, which sits slightly separate to that as well. So we offer an end-to-end solution for bus operators and local transport authorities. So that's a repositioning of the business. And we've done that because there are cheap imports coming into the market from China, particularly in the EV, in the battery sector, as the Chinese seem to own most of the battery manufacturing worldwide at this moment in time of the cells, which is a major challenge to everyone in Western Europe in terms of not just our vehicles, but in terms of car and truck and other vehicles that will be developed going forward. So we're positioning ourselves slightly differently in that we're an end-to-end provider, so we can offer, as John mentioned earlier, a total cost of ownership model, which gives people, if they want, they can cherry pick this, but we can give them a monthly fee leased vehicle, which is fully serviced and maintained, and also the infrastructure and fuel has been provided under that model as well, which differentiates us from others in the market at the moment. So if we move on to growth, after administration, 58 people were tubied across from the old company to the new company under Joe Bamford, John being one of them a couple of years ago. How he sneaked in, we don't know, but he's there. As of last Friday, we had 690 people on the payroll and working, well, not all, and some are still working from home, but employed with us here in Ballymena. And we've 120 in Malaysia as well. And our output from 2021 to 2022 will double. So it will. And as I said earlier, there's also that transition from 70% of what we build being diesel to 70% of what we build being zero emissions. So there's a challenge there for us as well in that skill set change within the workforce. And on top of that, we aim to employ another 250 people by the end of 2022. So we do. And one of the areas for growth for us, and we're doing a lot of market studies at the minute, is to grow into the European markets as well, where we don't have much of a product offering at the moment. So left-hand drive variants of our existing technologies. There are some challenges for that. Like everyone else, availability of people. We're currently struggling to get people to grow to the number of 930, particularly people with the skill sets we need. Welders in particular are difficult to get, and it was very unfortunate on the Migration Advisory Council recommendation that only coded welders were put on their exemption list when the bigger need, not only here in Northern Ireland but also in the UK mainland, is for standard welding, and there's a major shortage of welders across Ireland and the UK as a whole. Having worked previously in the materials handling sector in Mid-Ulster, they're also suffering very much from that issue. And that may lead us to having to put stuff offshore, which we don't want to do. We'd rather employ people here to manufacture in a fully integrated fashion. Employment costs continue to rise with people shortages. It's an employees' market there at the minute, so hourly rates continue to go up, and that obviously impacts competitiveness for us, particularly against the low-cost producers. And I mean, our biggest competitor is actually bringing their chassis in from China. So they are, while ours are fully vertically integrated and manufactured here. So there's a challenge for us there. And we need to continue to work with schools, colleges as well, to make sure that this change there is from the old style diesel fitter and mechanical engineer, and I can say that as I'm one myself by trade back in the day, into the new world of zero emissions, software and electronics, which is where the skills demand are at the minute. We're working very closely with the universities and some of the local schools in regard to that as well. There is, and I applaud the council here for their wanting to turn this council area into a clean tech hub. And we fit and sit very nicely within that and support the council fully in what they're in that desire to do that. And we continue to meet with the mayor and other local councillors about the drive for that, and we'll continue to support that going forward. And it was good to see they secured £500,000 worth of funding for a hydrogen college to be set up here, and those courses we will support, not only with putting some of our people through it, but also some of our people will help teach within that as well to grow those skills in the hydrogen economy. Planning and infrastructure, lack of hydrogen gas continues to be a problem. The bus and truck sector continue to outpace the ability to generate green hydrogen, and the infrastructure being in place to generate green hydrogen. I know HICAP have signed a deal with Fortescue of Australia, so Joe Bamford signed that to bring green hydrogen here from Australia, and Fortescue in Australia have just been given permission by the Australian government to build the world's biggest hydrogen electrolyser in country, and then that we would aim to import some of that green hydrogen here. There is an opportunity for Northern Ireland, given the amount of wind that we have here, to really embrace this green technology and use the curtailed wind we have and other wind we have, because when wind's curtailed and we're switching turbines off, convert that into hydrogen. That can then be put into our mass transport sector here, or truck sector here when truck comes through, and that's really a good circular green economy. So there's definitely scope for that. We need to look at the grid as well, obviously, to see how it will cope with more and more electric vehicles coming online, not just bus but car as well, and their ability then to take renewable electricity production too. And we need to see planning applications keep pace with technology to make sure that the planners have enough resource so that we can get these planning applications through that keep pace with the technology that's coming through. We need to see continued government support here. We're seeing it through Zebra funding in Northern Ireland. We need a joined-up approach between the energy strategy, the green growth strategy and the transport strategy to make sure those things line up. So they do. There's a massive opportunity there for the country to really green our transport sector, but it must it must be a joined-up approach with the energy and the green growth strategy. The technology in hydrogen and EV are at higher cost than diesel at the moment, typically more than twice. We need to bridge that gap with government support to ramp the volumes up. If we can get the volumes of buses in hydrogen up to 3,000 a year, that can come down to the same cost as a diesel bus. But there's a bridging part that needs to be done. We know Zebra funding has been used, and we know TransLink have used government funding to do that here. The bus operators as well need some support around fuel cost. Certainly the bus operators in the UK get the BSOG grant for diesel. That needs to transfer across to zero emissions buses to support hydrogen, because hydrogen to produce at the minute is still too expensive compared to diesel. We need to drive those costs down as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the use of curtailed wind for green hydrogen production would be a major step forward as well. That's everything from us. Thank you very much for your time, and if there are any questions, we're more than happy to take them.
Okay, well, thank you both very much. That's a very innovative presentation. Certainly exciting times for you as a company. And I suppose probably we in government and indeed as MLAs have been watching on as this exciting new development, particularly surrounding the hydrogen market. It's nice to see a local company being synonymous with that industry, in fact being a world leader and a first on that. I think that's something that we as local politicians really do admire, to see that a local company has grasped this, and particularly especially with the conversations in the run-up to COP26 as well. And I know you were showcasing at that. It's also an opportunity to put Northern Ireland firmly on the map in relation to the green economy and the renewable energy sector. So can I ask, I suppose probably, you have outlined in your presentation, I suppose, things that were in my head in relation to the challenges. So we know the opportunities in relation to green hydrogen in particular, but the challenges, that being skills, planning and support packages. Now, I suppose you've touched on the skills issue, which it's evident that there's a lack of skills capacity as we transition now towards this, and how you as a company. So maybe you can elaborate on how you as a company are developing your own workforce to meet the new demands of this exciting expansionist industry, and are you doing that through the links with the university? So I'm very, very keen to hear how the link with JCB and RISE has benefited locally here at Wrightbus in the development of these new hydrogen buses. And do you see, for example, I know this is a round picture I'm painting here, but obviously some are already out on the street, you've mentioned that. What have been the major challenges to date? Brought back, obviously there's going to be always teething problems, and you're going to be refining your product. What have been the main issues with the hydrogen buses that have been introduced, both here in Northern Ireland or further afield, and how have you modified and overcome those challenges? So that's just a broad picture about it.
It is. We'll start with the education piece first of all. So obviously we're working very closely with Queen's around the design engineering piece, and we've had meetings over the last 6 months with them in regard to what they're going to do with their curriculum. Certainly in the mechanical engineering school, which is the one we would have dealt most with, to look at how we transfer skills around to design hydrogen systems, which are gas systems, effectively refrigerant gas systems, but also how they integrate the electrical systems. So you get someone coming out of there who's, let's call them mechatronic, which is an industry term, where they've got skills in both mechanical design and electrical and software design. So that's an ongoing discussion with both universities, but particularly Queen's, about how they're going to amend their curriculum. In regards to our own workforce, we have our own welding academy where we bring outside trainers in and we upskill people in welding over a 12-week period. We're also working very closely here with the Northern Regional College. I know I was at the launch of their welding academy last week, so we will be. We have a request in to take people through there. We have taken 25 apprentices on this year from the local colleges across many disciplines within our organisation, and we're continuing to put them through our training programmes. But we do need, and this is what we're talking to a number of people about, to get into the schools and that's been difficult, obviously, with COVID, because we want to show young people that there are good careers in STEM if they do STEM subjects. We also recognise that in Northern Ireland and in manufacturing in particular, there's a significant shortage of females who come through into the manufacturing sector, and we need to address that as well. In fact, if you've seen our recruitment posters at the front and you've seen any of our videos for recruitment on LinkedIn, we've very heavily focused on trying to attract females by using the females that work and enjoy working within our business to highlight the opportunities there are there. So our aim now is to get back into the local school sector. We're engaging in the Summer Science School with Brian Cox here in Ballymena next year. I was at the launch of that on Friday with the Mayor, and we'll be a key player in that. And that's really getting even into primary schools as well, to show people there are world-leading technologies being made on their doorstep and very good careers. We have people like John who have come up from being an apprentice within our organisation to now being one of the senior team and being a director within our business. So there are opportunities. We have a number of people like that within the organisation who've gone down the apprenticeship route rather than have gone straight into the education route and have racked up a load of debt and then have come out and discovered there aren't jobs in the subject they've studied. So I think, that advanced apprenticeship schemes is something that we are engaging very heavily with as well. So I hope that answers the question around education. In terms of challenges on hydrogen buses, the first fleet went into Aberdeen, and the first key challenges were training their maintenance people and the people who fill the buses. You are dealing with hydrogen gas. If you do it properly, hydrogen gas or refrigerant gas, it can burn if it escapes. So you just have to engage everything properly. We work very closely with a company called Snell, who are a Dutch hydrogen pump manufacturer, to make sure that we have safety systems so that when you plug the bus in, that you have to wait on a green light to come on before you actually start discharging hydrogen through the pump from the tank into the bus. We have our telematics systems on the buses, so we work and we have weekly and monthly calls with the engineering teams in the bus operators to look at, can we develop, can we change, can we put software updates in. Having said that, all our buses go through a massively rigorous testing programme in the UK at Millbrook testing grounds, where we put up significant amounts of miles on them, and we fully data log everything we do. So every bus that leaves our factory also has 500 miles of driving put on it before it leaves as well. So there's a very rigorous testing programme. And also, as John mentioned earlier, we put into depot our people on a 24-hour basis when new technology is introduced and hold the hand of the bus operator until they're comfortable that we can start backing out.
Okay. And just finally, you can touch on this point, and I'll open it up to members. So obviously the committee and the department's engaging in a review of the 2011 Planning Act. Mm-hmm. Now we have had representation privately. I know Hydrogen NI, for example, are organisations that have met with us to talk about, if we don't have the planning structures in place in terms of legislatively, that we're missing a golden opportunity in capitalising on the green hydrogen potential that Northern Ireland has to offer. Is there anything particular in relation? You talk about, and I read in the media, obviously the import of green hydrogen sort of in some instances defeats the purpose whenever we have something here on our doorstep that potentially could supply and be world leaders on the green hydrogen field. Is there anything that you would want to leave with the committee in terms of comments surrounding particular issues surrounding, obviously your investors look towards the length of time that a planning process is taken for renewable schemes here in Northern Ireland before? Is there anything particular we as a committee can take away to say that in the review of the 2011 Planning Act, placing hydrogen in some aspect of that to be able to capitalise on the potential that we have? Because I think it has been mentioned, and maybe you can elaborate, that we are in a unique position situated within these isles, that we're hearing the conversations of blue and grey hydrogen from the rest of the United Kingdom, whereas Northern Ireland really does have the potential for green hydrogen. How do we capitalise on that?
I think you're right in what you've said. It's speed of application through so that we can attract investment. I mean, if you look at what came out of COP, the amount of communication that came out of COP about green hydrogen was huge. You know, the amount of press that came out about it. And if you look at social media, and maybe it's just my social media feeds and I need to get out more, the amount of stuff on it about green hydrogen is huge. And to think that Northern Ireland could become someday a net exporter of fuel, I mean, that would be huge for this country, so it would. So we would say, and just reiterate what has been said previously, it's speed of application and really looking at where there is going to be a huge, we think, huge net benefit to the country. How can those be fast-tracked through? We look at some of the schemes in the UK, Zebra in particular, which is funding for zero-emission vehicles. They actually fast-tracked some of that through. They give a fast-track route to that. To large projects there that were given huge benefits. So would there be a fast-track route that would enable, you know, these types of projects, which are going to be a huge benefit to the country, you know, a quicker route through? That's what I would think about that.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to members. So I'll go to Cathal Boylan first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and you're very welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Cathal.
It's a while from when I took my first visit up. I think it was maybe the Bendy bus was sent out to Las Vegas or something way back in the day.
Bendy bus.
No, I see there. I mean, it's an interesting conversation, even because you have a product here that's outweighed the actual infrastructure and also the resource, because we're going to have to take it in from overseas, you know. So I'm going to have to look at that carbon footprint, you know, because it defeats the purpose. I mean,
yes.
if we're saying we can't do it here and we have to invite it in, I mean, that's a problem for us in terms of the carbon footprint and exactly what we want to do. So that's the bigger problem. But just a couple of points, because I mean it's key. Because if you ask anybody, Mid-Ulster is the engineering capital, and if you're saying to me we can't get the engineering skills, and I do agree with the chair. I mean, it lays outside this committee, but the engineering has moved on now from the physical structure of any vehicle. You've done away with the pearl petrol head there, John, by all that talk. But the thing is now we're into telematics, you know, and it's more electronics and everything else involved in this. And the trades have moved on. And I think through the regional colleges, and I've been inviting this. I mean, a lot of them now, you go into a lot of the schools now and they're saying, you know, academia, but there's trades out there we need. There's a new skill set that we need, and I'm certainly encouraged. But just for this presentation, and it was a comprehensive presentation, see in terms of the number of buses now we've got here for the north, I mean, in terms of the costs, the number of buses that were run out here in the north itself, and see in terms of the cost of that, does that include then also the maintenance and all? Is that part of the government scheme in terms of the buses have been bought here in terms of hydrogen buses?
They have been bought purely on a capital spend basis, so it's just been capital money has come through the department. We had the launch of 2 weeks ago now, the week's flying that quick, 2 weeks ago now, of the 80 EV buses with Minister Hargey down at Titanic. And we've also had another order for 38 buses for Foyle, which TransLink have already, and I can say that because TransLink have already advertised that Foyle will go fully electric for their urban service. And that's at the end of 22, early into 23. So that is all purely, at this minute in time, capital cost. There is a new framework coming out for TransLink middle of next year, and we look with interest to see how they're going to structure that framework going forward. But at the minute, we do some work for TransLink, but the bus purchases at the minute are purely capital for the bus themselves.
And there's opportunities in terms of leasing, you know, in other ways and means going forward. Yeah.
There is, and some of the commitments we've made to TransLink, because this is a new technology for TransLink, is we have given them a commitment in terms of range and some quality commitments. And so we have parameters in place. We have a governance process in place to ensure that the asset they have bought performs according to how it should. And on top of that, we have worked very closely with TransLink, and we have shared various TCO models to help them understand the costs and if you like, the return on that investment over the next 12 to 15 years in terms of the length of time that they run the vehicles. And so there is a cost benefit to that, and to ensure, because there's less moving parts on a zero emission vehicle than there would have been in a diesel product. So there are benefits there, and we have committed to work with TransLink to capture and to work alongside them and to ensure then that going forward that we have those numbers in place.
No, but see, in terms of, because I know the EV, the electric vehicles, the first one's way back, I don't know, 2008 or something. Yeah. And I mean, obviously that progression has taken a number of years, and I hope that the hydrogen now moving forward, I know there's challenges for us, I hope that doesn't take as long, because I mean, that's key. That's a key element, because there's certain challenges too with the EVs as well. So how do you see that?
The hydrogen buses, the fleet we have out at the minute has 1.2 million miles up on the clocks, and it's saved over 1 million kgs of CO2 in the last 12 months. So that's sort of getting to be well-proved technology. What's happening with hydrogen then is Gen 2 hydrogen fuel cells are now starting to come out, and the cost of those is coming down. So we're beginning to see some of the cost benefit as more and more people like truck and car actually as well, and some of the car manufacturers have adopted fuel cell as well. We're beginning to see those prices falling. So that's what we want to see. We want to see the price of a hydrogen bus being the same as a diesel.
Yeah, we're not going to encourage. I mean, it's interesting you said 3,000 vehicles. I mean,
yes.
that's a target for us.
Yes.
At least that's part of the discussions when we sit around and do the energy strategy. We look at all the strategies we're trying to develop. Just a fine point then, I mean, because I heard you talked about the bus patronage and clearly the Chair mentioned planning. I mean, we see in Belfast there with bus lanes, that technology and all of that planning needs to go together collectively. You know, you mentioned about buses, different buses for different routes and everything else. But that has to be part of the whole plan if we, especially if it's public spend in terms of, you know what I mean, and that's where the broader conversation goes, you know. And there's a lot of engineering around the Katy area. Neil, you're more than welcome to take the engineers if you need them up on Wrightbus. I would encourage that. There's plenty of men around there. But listen, just in terms of where you see it in terms of the plan and the bus patronage and the growth in terms of that there, because you mentioned commentary on that.
So if you take it, there's about, if you take the UK and Ireland, there's about 45,000 buses in the fleet across the piece, and their aim is to be fully zero emission by 2035. So that's going to need, sort of 4,000. That's about a 12-year period from now. So that's because the guys, they rate their buses off over 12 to 15 years. That's going to mean sort of between sort of 3,500 to 4,000 buses annually, maybe ramping up a bit at the end. So that will come. We believe that will come as this transition takes place, and that will mean more familiarity with the bus operators. They'll develop their skill sets. We're helping them do that. It'll mean the cost will come down. We would like to think then the cost of fuel will come down as well, because there'll be bigger demand for the fuel, and hopefully the infrastructure starts catching up. And we would hope to see that the bus operating costs end up being the same as diesel in terms of both capital and running costs.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cathal. Roy Beggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. Certainly exciting times, and it's great the linkage that you've had with JCB and benefit each other. Now, you've said that at present 70% of your vehicles are diesel, and you intend next year to 70% to be zero emission, and you're also talking about doubling your output.
Yes.
But you've also indicated that there's an issue with the price of hydrogen. So I take it that the majority of your production next year is planned to be battery electric powered?
Yes, so the bigger majority of that for next year is battery electric. There are a number of tranches of buses that we're working on at the minute, particularly for Transport for West Midlands. They've already got a hydrogen fleet of 20, and they're looking at another significant amount of buses at that. But yes, in the first instance, battery electric will be the vehicle of choice for a number of these people, yes.
What I would add to that is that we are currently, in terms of our industry, we're mass producing hydrogen vehicles. We have a full production line of hydrogen vehicles, and we see that continuing throughout next year into 2023. And so that's established. And as Neil mentioned, there are currently discussions and proposals in place that would see that the differential between the battery electric and hydrogen close considerably. And we should know that comes of those discussions in the next few months. But that would see us building, well over 100 to 150 hydrogen double-deck only products, as well as we already have orders in place for single-deck hydrogen vehicles.
I take it, is that a UK government level to do with fuel subsidies or something like that? Is it?
Yeah, so through the ZEBRA funding initiatives that the UK government has laid out, which is an enabler for operators to transit from diesel to hydrogen. However, there are other, we have firm orders in place even outside of those schemes in the south of England. And again, that will be based on our new single deck product.
Obviously, hydrogen is still a fledgling industry, and no doubt if volumes will ramp up, costs will come down. But at present, are we able to produce enough hydrogen from the Energia, TransLink, and I don't know if yourselves are involved. There's a pilot program for green hydrogen using renewable energy. So is it presently powering your buses? I understand there were some difficulties at the start, or are we having to import even more expensive hydrogen to power them?
As far as I'm aware, and this is as far as I'm aware, TransLink are bringing hydrogen from Energia and maybe topping some of it up from BOC and the electrolyser in Bluebell in Dublin. So it is on the island of Ireland, but it is coming, some of it from the south, I'm led to believe, at the moment.
Okay, and you've indicated, as well as needing a hydrogen infrastructure and supply to scale up, there's potential issues with the grid to be able to charge these vehicles. At present, do you, in terms of ourselves, is that largely in terms of grid supply to TransLink bus depots, or what?
That isn't an issue as we sit today. I'm thinking more around in terms of our energy strategy and the strategy for the grid and grid investment going forward, when it becomes common that, in particular, car producers stop producing diesel and petrol vehicles, and everyone ends up with a charger at their house, or there's more chargers on the street. What does that look like? What are Sony doing about that with government help going forward? And then how do we get the grid to take as much and more renewable energy as is humanly possible, so that anyone that is charging an electric vehicle can do so safely in the knowledge that there's as much green energy going into that electric vehicle as possible?
And then finally, Mr. Chairman, in terms of key skills that you've indicated there's a shortage of, and you've mentioned welders in particular, are our FE colleges training enough welders locally at present, or is it in particular even more specialist welders in terms of aluminium welding, which is a very specialist area and special skills are required?
No, in terms of aluminium, we don't do any aluminium welding. I know there are other people that do it. Our aluminium comes, we cut it to size, and then we bolt the structures together. Having been at the launch of the Northern Regional College's new welding school last week, where there were 6 local employers there, and they have, I think, 12 students in the first cohort that comes in, and they were all going, we'd all like the 12, but we're going to have to divvy up and take a couple each. So we're not getting the people through. There is an issue in Northern Ireland with over-education, where kids are going into various subjects. They're racking up a massive amount of debt, and they're coming out of it with poor job prospects, where if they come in through a vocational work apprenticeship scheme, and we end up with people like John, who progress up through the business, earning from day one, and then obviously paying tax from day one, and then moving up through NVQ qualifications, etc. We supported people through degree qualifications, etc. If that's the way to go, other people are quite happy then to become a welder or a coach builder or a quality technician or whatever it is. There is an issue with that, and we need to make sure that going forward, and we're talking very closely to Queen's, there are jobs, they're good paying jobs, they're skilled jobs, but we need to make sure the transition through from secondary school to us, or from secondary school through the colleges, through the universities, is pulling the right skill level through, and we're engaging very heavily with the education sector on that.
Is there sufficient awareness of the job opportunities and the salary levels in skilled welders or other skilled technicians?
We're publishing that quite hard on LinkedIn and Facebook. We had 2 recruitment open nights. We had 120 people through the doors last Thursday night. We're running another one on the 25th of November. We advertise that very heavily. We do put our rates on about what welders and what coach builders, etc., are being paid. So we've been very, very clear. Plus, we've been engaging very heavily. As I say, we've taken 25 apprentices on, so we're engaging very heavily with the regional college. But I don't think, if you talk, and I do talk to the rest of the manufacturing businesses in the area and further afield, there isn't that drive of young people in through the regional colleges to satisfy the demand that's there now for these skill sets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, Liz Kimmins.
First came into this role, and we were there for the launch of the first hydrogen bus, so it's amazing to see where it's gone, even from in that short space. Just, I suppose, and Cathal mentioned around the patronage, and I'm interested in the work that you said you're doing with QUB and the sociology department. Is that something that was in place pre-COVID, or is that in terms of the impacts of COVID on public transport in general?
No, some of it started pre-COVID. COVID sort of brought a bit of a halt to it, and COVID has impacted bus patronage, but we are seeing, talking to the bus operators, some of them are back up now at 85%. But if you're talking some of the large urban bus operators, there are still significant numbers of people working from home.
Yeah.
So that does, and now hybrid working has come on board. We will see, bus patronage hit by that. They're not the people we're targeting here with this. We're looking to target with this those that drive into Belfast or drive to wherever in their car on a daily basis, and seeing how do we get them. And Cahill's absolutely right. This isn't just about the bus.
Yeah.
That does help, but it's also about easy access routes for bus. I know gliders, talking about some of the, and we do talk to Chris and Ian and the guys in Translink on a regular basis. Those bus routes in for them are critical going forward to make easy access and to make the bus and mass transport more attractive. So the joined up thinking between transport, energy, planning, etc. is key to getting mass transport solutions right.
Yeah, and I've lived in big cities in England, and it's very few people drive to work or anything. There's a massive difference in, I suppose, our culture here, and it's probably because we've big cities, but they're really big towns, and a lot of the time. But it's trying to change people's mindset, I suppose. Just in relation to COVID, and we've talked about the impact on public transport. Have you seen that having an impact on manufacturing in terms of the demand for new vehicles and things like that?
I'll let John touch on that.
So just repeat that question.
Just, since COVID, and obviously because less people are using public transport, has that impacted on manufacturing?
Well, during COVID, whilst the vehicles weren't operating, they were still aging. So there's still a demand on, or a responsibility on, operators to replace aging fleet. Indeed, Translink up until recently had one of the oldest bus fleets in the UK, and that's why they needed to upgrade their vehicles. And so we, through our market team, we keep a very close eye on the number of vehicles that are in any particular town or city, and the age, the average age and the overall age of those vehicles. During COVID, there was a pause placed on new vehicle procurement, and primarily due to the fact that government were subsidising operators. They were giving them the COVID grant. But there was, in order to qualify for the COVID grant, they could not use that to buy new vehicles. And so, whilst that was in place now, in fairness, many of our employees were furloughed, so there were no employees there to build the vehicles. But it did prove a difficult period for ourselves, and primarily myself, as we're looking, 2 and 3 years ahead. But based on the ageing fleet, based on some of the government initiatives, we are able to pull that back, and we used that opportunity, as Neil mentioned earlier, to develop product. And so some of the products that we have just recently launched, if you like, it was there was a silver lining in it for us, in the sense that if the world had continued on and accelerated the purchase of new product, we may have missed the boat, so to speak. So we took full advantage while the industry kind of took a bit of a step back and reflected on how they're going to come out the other side of COVID. We took advantage of that in terms of our upstream engineering processes and manufacturing, and positioned ourselves now in a place where then we can glean some of that sort of escalation process and some of those government initiatives. So we're very well placed to do that.
That's good. I mean, and just in the briefing you said that in 2022, 70% of buses manufactured will be zero emission, which obviously is really good, and we're coming out of COP, and that's kind of what everybody's talking about. Whereas this year, 70% was going towards fossil fuel-run buses. So it's just to see, do those numbers reflect the contracts you have for the incoming year? And does it further reflect on the overall trend, I suppose, within the industry regarding green transport, or are you seeing a bit of a shift?
No, absolutely. There's a shift. We're right in those discussions. All of our discussions, we've been hosting customer visits, and since restrictions have been lifted, we have invited many of our customers to Ballymena, probably 1-2 a week, which is quite a big deal in our industry. So it just shows you the interest that's there from the UK operators to come across to see our facility and to see our product and to meet our people. And all of those discussions are centred around our portfolio in terms of zero emissions. So it's hydrogen, it's electric, it's both, single, double. We talk about the advisory tools that we have in place in Queens and so on, and their after-sales support or telematics. So, but yes, we see where our customers are now, much like TransLink. They're looking at the next 10-year bus fleet. So they're buying vehicles now that's going to last them for the next 10 years, and therefore, for many of these regions where there already is clean air zones or zero emission zones, then diesel's just out of the question. Yeah. But there are, as I mentioned, some small retail operators who still would see life in the old diesel yet, and they're still keen to hold on to that.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I suppose that is kind of particularly the last few weeks. You probably have that really trigger a lot as well. Just my last point in relation, I suppose, at COP26, the North had endorsed the Glasgow Declaration to commit to rapidly accelerate the transition to less polluting vehicles. So it's just, I mean, in terms of, from your perspective, of any comment on that, or how you see that fitting in with where things are going in?
That's totally on brand for us, so it is. It fits right in. We were lucky to be one of the few UK manufacturers actually who were allowed a vehicle. So we had a hydrogen double decker in the green zone. It was too big to go into the blue zone, so it was in the green zone, and it actually did. It was launched from London and drove the 600 miles to COP in a tour, and it stopped off at places like JCB and married up with their hydrogen combustion engine driven excavators and backhoes. So both ourselves and JCB were in the green zone. So this is right on brand for us. COP came at a great time. We had the stand manned fully for the full 2 weeks, and there was a lot of interesting conversations. And just prior to it, as I said, there was a green hydrogen deal signed between HiCap and Fortescue in Australia. So very much fits exactly with where we're taking the business.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's go now to Andrew Muir.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming along. I saw the vehicle at COP26, and being there for the full 2 weeks was probably a commitment to be there. But it was on the day when you announced the to deal with TransLink in terms of electrification of the fleet and dairy, and I think that's a really positive thing. Just two issues really to follow up yourselves. You mentioned about planning applications, keeping speed with technology. If you could just tell us a bit more about that and what the issues are around planning.
It's just the speed of getting those through to get our people here, and it's actually the sister company that's dealing with it rather than us ourselves. And Rise they're looking at a number of sites in Northern Ireland and then looking at the planning restrictions around putting electrolyzers in those. I know Foyle was mentioned, Foyle Harbours was mentioned for one as well. But it's just the speed, and it's not just here, it's in UK mainland as well, of getting these green hydrogen infrastructure projects through, and the more government can support these, the sooner Northern Ireland could possibly move itself to being a net exporter of energy.
Okay. So when those applications are made, obviously there's statutory consultees have to be consulted with, and there's an approval timescale.
Yeah.
What's holding this up? Because this is the issue. We're sitting as a committee for infrastructure, and planning sits within the Department of Infrastructure. So if we're going to try to encourage decarbonisation of transport, then we need to have a planning system that's responsive. So we just understanding what is it, statutory consultees and the delay in coming back, or?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not over that level of detail. That's, as I say,
Yes.
the sister company Rise, but what we will do is we will engage with them and come back to you in written format.
Fair enough.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's important to get to that and see what way
I'll
we
make
can-
sure that happens.
Yeah, just to support that, because the planning system in many aspects in Northern Ireland is holding back economic growth and particularly green growth, and it needs to be addressed. The other one's around skill sets and recruitment. Is this a particular issue post-Brexit in terms of being able to have access to the free movement of labour, and what engagements has been made further to the stuff in terms of the migration list, in terms of trying to get more flexibility around that?
Manufacturing NI put some communication out about 2 months ago to say that between 2016 and now, the amount of foreign national workers in Northern Ireland had reduced by 33%. Certainly a significant number of those were involved in the manufacturing sector. I worked in Mid-Ulster for a number of years, and the company I worked in employed a significant number of welders from Eastern Europe. It's a skill set that seems to be very, very common out there.
Yeah.
Those people come and stay here for 3, 4, 5 years, return home, and there was always a backfill of those people. Given what the Migration Advisory Council have done, and I did make representations in previous employment to them, those aren't being backfilled. And that is an issue. That is coupled with the fact that we're not getting the younger people into these skill sets in the numbers we require to fill that gap that's been left as well. So it's sort of double whammy there, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's a real issue of concern, because it's impacting upon businesses. I think it's important that I say that. Just the last one is just in relation to the hydrogen and the production of green hydrogen and the infrastructure for the provision of that in Northern Ireland. Getting access to that and getting that rolled out in different areas is a real challenge. Is there anything more government can do to try to improve that?
Obviously, we've touched on planning and zoning of land, obviously, and comes into that. And then there's also, are we dealing with the curtailed wind piece as well? Because, we have energy, we have a lot of wind in Northern Ireland, and if we're switching off turbines or paying people to switch off turbines, when that could be converted into green hydrogen, which then can fuel vehicles which otherwise are going to run on diesel or electric or whatever on the grid, with whatever the grid had. Definitely the curtailed wind piece needs resolved as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think important with that, I suppose maybe...
Sorry, can we excuse John? John is a very important thing to do. We have a customer arriving in, and he has to collect them from the airport. Look after them.
Customers key.
Customers more important than you guys.
Thank you very much, John.
No problem. That's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
And we're talking about the curtailed wind piece, etc., and those are things that we can follow up on. Is hydrogen storage capacity an issue? So, as you envisage the rollout of hydrogen, essentially how does the storage capacity roll out across different depots, etc.? Is that an issue?
Not so much, because it's tanked. So basically what you do, like with any gas, you basically store it under pressure. So at what tends to happen is you store it under significant pressure at the depot where it's generated at, meaning you can get the more pressure you store it under, the more volume of gas you can get into the same tank size. That's then released into tankers that will drive, hopefully with hydrogen-powered lorries, and then that can actually go and be delivered as a diesel tanker would deliver to a tank in depot for whatever you would do. There are also the opportunities for, and I know certainly in Scotland, some of the councils in Scotland, for instance in Aberdeen, the council have a hydrogen storage yard. They're purchasing hydrogen-powered refuse lorries as well. So not only do the council use it, the bus operators can use it as well. So there's a more joined-up approach around hydrogen storage, hydrogen generation, that it's done at a central hub, and that can be used by both council and the bus operators as well. So there's more joined-up thinking in that regard, and that's maybe something we need to consider.
Interesting. George Robinson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for an excellent presentation.
Thank you, George.
My question would be around the business has expanded out to foreign countries, and particularly Malaysia, you had mentioned, and you have 120 employees out there.
Yes.
Would they come from here, from the existing factory, or would they be employed out there in Malaysia?
It's a mixture. So we do have some people out there on expats contract from here. They're typically more technical people who are looking after the bus design and the bus build. The vast majority of employees, shop floor and some of the management team are Malay people, or people who have migrated to Malay.
Yes,
they may be from
yes.
Singapore, they may be from Nepal or wherever else they come from to go and work in Malaysia. But yes, there are some Northern Ireland people fully based and employed out in Malaysia on expat contract.
On a permanent basis, would they? Or?
Some of them are on a permanent basis. Some of them go out for 6 to 8 months at a time, and then somebody else. And we see that as a huge development opportunity for some of our young up-and-coming managers to go out and live and work in a different environment with a different culture, and to get that world experience. And that's something we'll continue to do.
Do you ever see the opportunity, or an opportunity where you could have another factory as well as the Ballymena one here in Northern Ireland?
Possibly, yes. Now, I've 90 acres to fill at the minute, George. That's going to take me a wee while, so it is, you know.
Right.
So,
just from
not next week, certainly.
Right. Just from a geographical point of view.
Look, we'll consider many things as we go through as a business. Look, we've developed drivetrains. Those drivetrains don't necessarily just have to be limited to bus. And that's something we're looking at further down the line as this technology matures. So could we build truck? Idea. Could we build refuge? Could we build ambulance? Could we build whatever? Yeah. If we've got the drivetrains, if we've got the skill sets to do that, that is something certainly we will look at in the future. But we're very much focused on bus for now.
Do you have anywhere in mind, George? Perhaps Libavady, maybe?
The Northwest.
A final supplementary, quick one from Cal Boylan.
It's been a very good presentation and interesting conversation. Neil, just in terms of, and it's slightly outside our remit in terms of, but in terms of the skill set, because it's vitally, vitally important, in terms of the company, percentage-wise, where are we at? And I appreciate the Brexit issue and everything else, but we should be looking at those vocations ourselves.
Yes.
It shouldn't also all be about academia and everything else. Yes. It should be, there's good jobs here, good pay, good contracts, I'm sure, and we'll have a conversation when we go for a visit.
Yes.
But in terms of the actual skill set percentage, where are you now in terms of covering all that, or your future plans?
So at the minute, as I said, we've 690 people in the business. About 400 of those work on the shop floor, and they're split up across a number of different skill sets. So the two biggest skill sets we would have would be coach building, which is a trade. 3. Coach building, which is a trade. Welding, which is another trade. And they probably make up, out of that 400 people, they're probably about 35% of those people. And then the other trade that's really coming in now is vehicle electricians, so people who can run cables, because even the hydrogen buses have a significant amount of electronic and electrical components, because the fuel cell actually feeds a battery, and it's the battery that drives the wheels and the motors on the wheels. So, that will probably take up to about 40% of the shop floor will probably be in those particular skill sets.
And there's a big demand going forward, and we'll need to fill those places.
There absolutely is for those skill sets, and there's a number of various businesses within this council area looking for those skill sets, and not just ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John, or Neil, sorry, thank you very much. Very, very useful presentation, and we're looking forward then to our visit to the Wrightbus facility. So I think that's been very, very helpful. It certainly chimes with a lot of the conversations we've been having, in particular in relation to decarbonisation and the public transport fleet. So I think there's a number of aspects to this that, whether it's conversations with TransLink, and which we'll continue to do, you as an industry, and indeed also the planning aspect is something that, and Andrew has touched on it as well as I, that we really need to get right for this. Yeah. So it's something that we'll certainly be taking up. I note you hopefully maybe going to supply us maybe with as a briefing paper from your sister company, Rise, in relation to the issues from a planning perspective.
Yes.
That'll certainly help us as well. But in the meantime, we'll not detain you any further, and thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to seeing you in the factory, and I'll go over now and make a few sandwiches.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members. Okay. Wait till Neil's left us. Okay, members, I think that was very, very useful to us all. It certainly gives us an insight from an industry perspective, and it's actually very interesting to see the significant overlaps here, even not only with our own committee, but the Committee for Economy as well, and that skill set. And I think that's something that we need to maybe give a wee thought to, how we can help sort of join the dots. But on one issue that is certainly our responsibility, and I think it would be good for the committee to have a briefing from an organisation such as Hydrogen NI, because it sort of maybe will give us a broader overview in relation to the challenges from a planning perspective, because we need to really home down on what the issues specific are. So, look, I was thinking about this, and I was speaking with Jim during the meeting, perhaps to seek formal committee agreement to ask the Minister what scope there may be, or to have fast-track planning decisions where speed of application is key for important beneficial infrastructure projects. So I'm thinking about, sorry, that's maybe my phone is affecting that. I'm just trying to think about how we could perhaps help the industry to be ready, or from a planning perspective, that if there is potential for inward investment, that Northern Ireland's capitalising on that, because I think that's going to be one of the key challenges. I know I have met in a personal capacity with Hydrogen NI, and that is the concern, that where the planning systems are not put in place with these large sort of scale renewable projects, that essentially the investment opportunities fall away. And Northern Ireland has really positioned itself to be at a cutting edge of this. And I think we did mention with the Chief Planner when he briefed the committee regarding a specific planning policy in relation to hydrogen. It's certainly things that I would like to explore, but I think we as a committee should maybe look towards a briefing from the likes of Hydrogen NI and other interested bodies to then say, is there a way in which we can present to the Minister by means of committee agreement for a potential fast tracking of planning applications of this nature? Is that a direction members would be interested?
If there's a problem with planning, we need to learn about it first, and then we decide what to do.
Sure, I do support it, but I wouldn't. The terminology fast tracking is not a good terminology. Okay. What I would say is that we need to fully understand, because some of this ground could be zoned for development. It's just we need to look at the process and how we can assist businesses going forward. Whereas when you say fast tracking, anybody could ask the terminology. The terminology fast tracking is not a good terminology, but
Okay.
we just change the terminology. But I understand.
Yes, well, it's to try to assist. Obviously,
absolutely
if
assist
the
the
focus
business,
is
yeah,
towards decarbonisation, if that's where our focus of our committee
Yeah,
inquiry
absolutely.
is, if that's where the focus of government targets are going to be, if we as the government arm of that are not prepared to put processes in place to enable
that's the
investment,
terminology we use.
that's the approach. But
Yeah.
I agree. I think what we do first of all is we try to gain a few more briefings in relation to the specific planning related challenges facing the industry, so that can help feed into the review of the 2011 Act. So our members agreed with that approach.
Yep.
We will get information, follow-up information from Neil, from RISE, but we could also organise for a briefing from Hydrogen NI or other associated bodies to inform the committee of the challenges that it faces. Members agreed?
Great.
Great. Thank you, members. Okay, we will now move to agenda item number 10, which is the forward work programme. Can I draw members' attention to the proposed draft work programme at page 98? Are members content to note?
Sorry, Chair, just in relation to the 8th of December, we're going down to Armagh for it says about the visit to the observatory and the planetarium. Just the context of that.
Yeah. I think this was something that had been had suggested. Do you want to maybe elaborate?
No, there was a wee element. Me and Jim was looking at. I mean, Chair, what we used to do is we used to look at places where we could use in the areas to try not only promote but have our meetings now.
Yeah.
I had the conversation the Chair already had picked, but there's funding comes out of the Assembly for the observatory and the planetarium, right? And it's public money, so we decided they asked us if there was any committee visits, would they come down to the planetarium, and I asked the Chair would he consider it,
So I think probably just to lay out, Andrew, the visit to Armagh is specifically to tie in, and it does tie in well with relation to the railway line, okay? And also to give the Council the opportunity to talk about broader infrastructure issues, which I think fits well within our remit. Cahill had suggested that if we were meeting down there as a subsequent follow-up meeting to that, following the main body of the meeting, that if the committee was interested to visit the planetarium and the observatory, that option would be made available to members. I get your point, it's maybe stretching as to what this committee's remit is, but I think the option is there for members if they wish to, following the main body of the meeting, to go on then to a follow-up visit, such as what we're doing now as opposed to post-actual committee meeting, that option's available, so it's more of an informatory.
Okay, so if it's an option, it's fine.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
Can we just clarify, is there any involvement of the infrastructure committee or department with the observatory, or is it just basically a tourist visit, and maybe could we have other areas of where we go and visit? We're down there if anybody's interested.
Well, I think we're going to follow that point up. I don't know if you've anything to add to that, Jim, but I know, but
I'm really saying if it is relevant to this committee.
Because if I had it my way and the chairman, we actually would have used maybe the marketplace theatre. I would have requested the Chair to go to another facility.
Yeah.
Now, because there's public money in this building, and we're going to the council, which is fair enough, because we could have facilitated the council in any building, like we're here in Tullyglass,
or the planetarium,
or the planetarium. That's all.
It's a follow. It's more of a follow-up. Your point's noted.
But you're more than welcome, right? But I'll remember when we go over your way the next time.
That'll be great. We're down that way.
So look, well, that's more of the context.
Okay, that's fine. That's no problem.
The main body of the meeting obviously will be in relation to wider infrastructure issues in the Armagh area, and in relation to the Armagh rail link. So members content with that?
Yeah.
Okay, content. Thank you, members. Okay, we now move to agenda item number 11, which is any other business, and members of any other items of business they wish to raise. Firstly, just can I thank our staff here at the committee for organising this out visit. I think we as members just don't appreciate how much work goes in the background to organising something like this. Given the complications that there is as well, there is really a desire from the committee staff to try and get us out and about, and I would just re-emphasise, please, where possible, please engage with them in their email trail, because it is very, very difficult to organise an outside visit if we don't know exactly where members are going to be or what they're going to be. You know, some members thought maybe we could zoom in this meeting. Unfortunately, that facility's not there when we're out and about, but there is a keen desire expressed by every single member to try to get out where possible, and I'm trying to do that. The staff are trying to do that, but we need people to cooperate. So thanks very much to the staff for what they've done, and we look forward to the next stage.
George, he's not picking on you, George.
My sincere apologies.
No. Actually,
No,
George has made his way across,
No,
but it's with others. So please keep with the committee and keep in contact, and we'll certainly try our best whenever it comes to the next one. Liz, you've a question?
No, and I'll echo your comments, Chair. I think it's very difficult. I know myself, I'm terrible sometimes at getting back to people. So, I think it's been good to get out and about as well. Just a quick one, particularly as it's Road Safety Week, I was hoping we could maybe ask for an update on the A1 upgrade from the department, just to see how things are going. We haven't heard anything for a while, so just if I could.
I think that's a very good idea, and I know in the Assembly during the week there was Life After, a charity organisation that has been set up with the real lived experiences of those who have lost loved ones as a result of road collisions. And in the course of that conversation, I wanted to draw out essentially what contact there had been, because obviously the Minister had launched the consultation with victims and survivors. And I think it's probably important that we try to tease out those questions as well, what engagement has happened to help feed into a strategy. But the A1 is certainly an issue of concern, both pertaining to both kind of our constituencies, and it would be something that I'd be certainly keen to hear an update on. Any other members? Roy?
I'm aware the A1 has been a cause of many fatal accidents, particularly crossing the dual carriageway. But I think it would also be useful just to have a general update of road safety in terms, and specifically address this point as well, but just to be aware of what are the main causes of death and serious accidents.
Okay, thank you. So members are agreed with that action point? Yes? Okay. Any other points? No? Members happy enough?
Great.
Okay, thank you, members. We now move on to agenda item number 12, what is date, time and location of next meeting. The next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. Wednesday the 24th of November 2021 in room 29 Parliament Buildings. I advise members that they should now make their way to Wrightbus site 201 Galgorm Road, Ballymena, County Antrim. And I can advise members to please maintain social distancing while leaving the meeting and remove all items of papers, water bottles, glasses, etc. Thank you, members. The meeting is adjourned. 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 The meeting is adjourned.